Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's great to get together and discuss what is a really important topic right now relating to employees' welfare, especially during these extraordinary times that we find ourselves in. COVID-19 requires us to take a step back, acknowledge that life has truly changed, and evolve our existing protocols to ensure that our employees feel supported and comfortable when traveling and meeting for business. What we've seen developing over the past several months is that duty of care has entered the C-suite discussion like never before. It truly is square in the middle of board agendas. In line with this, Collinson, in partnership with Crisis 24, which is a GardaWorld Company, are pleased to leverage over 55 years of experience in medical and security assistance to bring you this webinar today. It's designed to support each of you as you look to evolve your current travel risk management solutions in the light of COVID-19 and the upcoming ISO standard. That's ISO 31030. Today we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. We have Richard Hancock, the Managing Director, Asia Pacific for Crisis 24. As a director for Crisis 24, Richard provides in-depth crisis risk mitigation services in the Asia Pacific region to governments, NGOs, and Fortune 500s. Richard has also worked as an inspector for the Royal Hong Kong Police for 8 years, where he was responsible for land and maritime counterterrorism operations. Next, we have Nicola Winchester, Asia Pacific Travel Meetings and Events Leader at Ernst & Young, EY. So part of EY's travel meetings and events leadership team, Nicola oversees EY's travel program, working to deliver exceptional client service and change management initiatives that drive indirect savings without impact to service. Prior to EY, Nicola worked with major airlines, including Qantas, British Airways, and Virgin Atlantic. Next, we have Bob Quick, founder for Global Secure Accreditation. Prior to establishing GSA in 2018, in response to increased risk and threats to the hotel sector, Bob served 31 years with the British Police Service, overseeing investigations into some of the most complex terrorism cases in the UK, managing protection of the British royal family, Prime Minister, and Cabinet, and leading the security of the UK diplomatic community and visiting heads of state to the UK. And next we have Dr. Simon Worrell, Global Medical Director for Collinson, leveraging over 20 years of experience in the delivery of international medical assistance and emergency care, and significant specialist expertise in immunology and communicable diseases. Simon leads Collinson's Medical Services Department, focusing on wider international health challenges faced by global travelers. Next, we have Yining Tan. In addition to holding a consultant role with Collinson, Yining is the founder and director of Sino-U Limited. She has over 10 years experience in global and entrepreneurial businesses, providing risk consultation services across North America, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Todd Hancock, President Asia Pacific for Collinson. I've worked in the Asia Pacific region for over 25 years in leadership roles with companies such as Cognitive, Williams Lee Tag, and BT Global Services. In addition to leading Collinson's Asia Pacific business, I'm the immediate past chairman and current governor of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce here in Hong Kong. So now that everyone's acquainted, let's get straight into the panel discussion. I think we have some really rich content to discuss today. We had a pre-call a couple days ago, and it was really engaging. I think there's going to be some great discussion here today. If anyone from the audience would like to ask questions, please pose those through the Zoom chat box, and we'll look to get to those a little bit later. So let's start by taking stock of where we are in Asia Pacific today and globally. Borders remain closed in markets like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Australia to only residents, with markets such as the UK implementing increasingly strict measures, despite COVID having been around for over a year now. It's a crazy thing to say, isn't it? Over a year. Travel bubbles canceled indefinitely due to recent spikes between Hong Kong and Singapore, for example, although there are some rumors that we might start to see some movement in the right direction on that bubble. And the good news is that domestic travel is reasonably strong in some countries where cases are both under control and the destinations to travel, for example, Vietnam, Thailand, plus China before their most recent spike. And then we have the rolling out of the vaccine, which is well underway in certain markets, while others have yet to announce the roadmap. So Simon, I'm going to start with you. With global travel still largely at a standstill, is the vaccine the silver bullet we've all been waiting for? Or will other containment methods such as testing remain key for the foreseeable future?
Thanks very much, Todd, and hello to everyone. The sun's just coming out in England. We actually do have the sun occasionally. So the answer to both questions is yes. The vaccine certainly is an amazing silver bullet, an incredible achievement by humanity, developed incredibly quickly and very, very effective. I was just telling the group before this started that some recent data came out yesterday, believe it or not, from Scotland, saying that hospital admissions have decreased up to 94% after one shot of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination. Hospital admissions have decreased by that amount. It's fantastic, fantastic news for us. We're in a halfway house at the moment where vaccination is being rolled out. It's not completed. The at-risk populations are being and have been addressed in our country. And what's important to realize is for at least 6 to 8 months, we will need vaccine rollout, but also testing so that we are safe during this transition period. Clearly, testing at airports, testing at the workplace is something we're very experienced in, but for the PCR tests and the LAMP tests and the antigen tests, this is a way that we are going to protect those who need to be protected whilst they're waiting for the vaccine. Please get vaccinated. That's my message for today.
Okay, so a great step for humanity relative to the speed of the vaccinations, and looks like the efficacies are really coming through, which is amazing. And your perspective is that we will see coexistence of vaccines and testing for some time to come. Now, the other thing that's on the agenda associated with vaccines and testing is the concept of digital health passports. What role do you see digital health passports really playing as we look into the future? I mean, we've got things like the Common Pass, you've got Verifly, you've got the IATA initiative, a number of different initiatives around the world. And I guess that's a two-part question. How do you see that playing out? But also, how do you see that playing out relative to corporates and their employees?
Yes, digital passports will be very, very important. I'm sure we're all old enough to know about yellow fever passports. They were something made out of paper with a nurse that had maybe signed your name, and when they did it 20 years, 30 years ago, technology has moved on and we won't be able to use that system. So we're going to use something current and digital that will need international agreement and collaboration, which is the tricky part. Technology, not so much. There is a debate in several countries at the moment as to the best context to use the passport, because clearly you may be able to use it internally as well as externally, and different countries will have different approaches, especially about internal use. If I have to show my passport to go to my local restaurant or to go to the cinema, then the argument is that you may be developing a vaccination, an obligatory vaccination by stealth, i.e. if my liberties are still curtailed, then I will actually have to have the vaccine. Some countries have gone down that route, some countries will not go down that route. What is not contentious, or much less contentious, is the use for international travel. I think this is a great idea, essential in fact, and what we hope is that when someone is vaccinated, they will have the passport. They will not need to do a departure test at the airport. They will not need to do an arrival test at their destination. They will not need to be quarantined at their destination, and life will be much easier. Business will research, will really start again. So this is incredibly important for us, I think, as a community.
It's good to hear that perspective, Simon. At the very top there, you commented on the trickiness, which is the trickiness, I guess, of the engagement and the collaboration across governments. Certainly in some of the activity that I've been involved in, wearing my Canadian Chamber of Commerce hat, trying to work with the Canadian government, the Hong Kong government, the UK government, etc. That has proven tricky. And I know that some of the initiatives that you've been pursuing over the many months in the UK has proven tricky, just on a unilateral basis, let alone on a multilateral basis. Well, I want to move across to Nicola. Nicola, it's fantastic to have somebody that comes from the other side of the table, somebody that is protecting employees on a day-to-day basis and making sure that you've got the right duty of care pieces in place. So though business is largely conducted virtually at present, there's no doubt that the value of in-person meetings and events, for that matter, will always remain. I don't think the concept of the value of of face-to-face meetings goes away. So with travel expected to restart in some markets this summer, we heard Boris talking about it yesterday, parts of Europe, etc. What steps has EY been taking to evolve your travel risk management strategies to better protect the employees when meetings and travels do start to begin again?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we think back what's happened over the last year, there's been various things that EY as an organisation has done, very similar to many organisations, in fact. So, if we look at it based on the initial situation as it evolved, that was all about managing the risk of our travellers, making sure that we could repatriate them back to home markets, and supporting them in terms of any travel plans that they had. And within that process, or the processes that we actually manage within our business, we're fortunate within EY that we have, a rather heavy reliance actually on digitalization and automation. So given the size of the organization that we are, we have 300,000 travelers in our business, and prior to COVID, 70% of our population are travelers. So that gives you an idea of the scale of what we're supporting in terms of managing risk for travelers. And so it would be impossible for us to do that just based on sheer manpower resources alone. So for us, the way to do that is to make sure that we've got the right processes in place using automation to update our employees in terms of, if you're booking to go to a destination, this is everything you need to know. If something happens in that destination, here's everything that you need to know. Before you go to the destination, here's what you need to do, and here's what you're required to satisfy before you even think about making a booking. So it's definitely been, centered around us making sure that the processes that we have are, fit for now and then fit for the future of how we foresee travel evolving through the next, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months into what a return to travel is going to look like for us. And so one of the other things for us that we've been doing is, I think, again, similar to a lot of organizations, we've worked extremely closely with our security risk management team. As I think about what happens through the whole pandemic and the evolution of that, really the travel meetings and events team and the security risk management team were probably the closest in terms of collaboration. And as a result of what's come out of that collaboration and what we've experienced, we've actually now set up an internal team, a collaboration team that we call our Security and Travel Intelligence Center, or STIC team as we fondly refer to it. But and that team is fundamentally a 24/7 unit that, as things evolve, as travel does start to resurge, in the event that we see things happening where we need to react quickly, we've got the right support for our people, that can make contact with people, that can drive, you know, notifications to people, and just make sure that we're doing the right thing by our travelers to give them the information, the support that they need. And so, you know, as I think about what we're doing, it's very much centered around some of the operational components. And then if you look at it from a strategic level, it's using automation and even looking at what solutions are out there from third parties. You mentioned some of the organizations that are, you know, looking at the traveler passport, the vaccine passport. And for us, startup organizations are definitely something we embrace within our program, because, you know, some of these solutions we can't design ourselves. We have to bring third parties into the mix of what we do in order to make sure we've got a very well balanced program. And so one thing I would say, as much as, you know, you're absolutely right in what you said, Todd, that, you know, the face-to-face meetings have all been replaced by virtual. I don't think it means that any corporate travel team has been any less busy than they were pre-COVID, because of the fact that, you know, we've had to adapt so quickly to all of the changes that have come at us and embrace different technologies to allow that virtualization to happen. So it's been quite a journey in truth, but I have to say, I think with the experiences that we've gone through and what we've learned through the process, I think it just stands us in the best possible position that we can be in as we do start to see, you know, things normalize to whatever that kind of normal is going to look like in the future.
It's a really interesting comment that you've just made, relative to the travel teams being no less busy than they were, even though they're traveling. I think there's a lot of people around the world that are facing the same. Would you say, Nicola, that although the pandemic has been the impetus, what has actually happened, and you talk about your stick team, is some of the things that maybe corporates should have been thinking about before have come to the forefront. They've been put onto that C-suite agenda, and therefore the attention, budgets, et cetera, that weren't necessarily there before are coming to the forefront. Yeah,
I would definitely agree with that. You know, I think what the pandemic has done is it's actually accelerated, I think, some of the things that were, you know, kind of going to become fundamental in corporate travel programs of the future anyway. And so if I look at it from our perspective within EY and we think about the sustainability agenda, you know, honestly, are we going to go back as an organization to traveling to the degree that we did before the pandemic? Definitely not. You know, we had targets and goals that were already, you know, being talked about, discussed and debated in terms of what we want to be as an organization of the future. And I think this situation has allowed us to take stock of where we are, realize that, you know, with the surgence of the technologies that there are now to virtualize meetings and to allow people to collaborate without having to get on an aircraft, there really is no need for the amount of travel to be conducted that we had in the past. Now, having said that, you know, a fundamental culture of an organization is based around being able to meet your clients and also being able to meet in person with each other. So you have to find, I think, the right balance for allowing that to happen so that you can have that collaboration, teaming, and build your organization culture and spirit, but at the same time being, you know, kind of cognizant of the world that we actually now live and work within. And, you know, honestly, for us, we actually do have not only the kind of travel risk piece fundamental to what we think about in terms of our travelers, we think about it from a well-being perspective as well. You know, if people don't need to be away from their families, do they really need to be? And so absolutely, I think the pandemic really has allowed us, along with the corporate travel industry, to kind of recalibrate where we are today and where we're going to be as we move into the future, and to be different and just to be more conscious of, you know, of how we travel. We call it a program with purpose within EY, meaning that, you know, for us, the purpose for why we're traveling, the purpose of our program is to support our employees, our clients, and to be, you know, the best that we can be. And so I think that this has been a really good learning experience to allow us to do that.
That's great. That's great insight. Thank you very much, Nicola. So I guess along the same themes, Bob, I'm going to put you on the spot now. We've heard Nicola talking about how her organization's been evolving their TRM strategies in mind. I think a key question for a number of people on the call that have heard about the new ISO standard coming down the track is what exactly is it? What is ISO 31030 and what action should my company be taking in light of it?
Okay, thanks, Todd. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nicola, in what she said, she's really getting ahead of the curve because the new standard really does advocate a lot of what has just been said and more. And its background really is an initiative from the UK standards community about 3 years ago in response to a growing perception that in travel the risks were intensifying and becoming increasingly complex. So the UK submitted an initiative to the International Standards Organization, which was accepted, and therein launched a program of work involving over 160 countries or experts from those countries and 82 national standards bodies. Many countries have a national standards body. In the UK, we have the British Standards Institute, who lead the work on behalf of the UK standards community. So all of those bodies came together over the last 3 years, bringing travel risk management expertise, standards development expertise together to produce this standard. And it's exciting in it's the first global benchmark standard that we've seen for travel risk management. And it really gives us some clarity. It brings together some innovation and guidance to help us understand, what reasonable standards are and what good practice looks like. So the standard is due to be launched this summer. It has just completed a major consultation phase and engaging with stakeholders around the globe, and that's gone very well. The final feedback is now being incorporated into the final draft for publication this summer. So what's the standard all about? Well, it's derived from ISO 31000, which is the most widely used risk management standard in the world, and any risk management professionals here will probably be familiar with it. It's got common principles and a similar framework, so it's derived from that. It is an end-to-end standard. In effect, it deals with all aspects of travel risk management, with an expectation that process would actually be applied to every trip. And so that level of scrutiny and care would be applied no matter who it is or where they're going in the world. It requires, the standard is written in a way as to be flexible, but what it actually says is to implement, maintain and improve a travel risk management framework. Now, of course, many companies have very developed frameworks in place, and they will probably find they're very aligned with this standard already, but many are not. Many will have major gaps, and in fact, some companies will be nowhere near this standard. So it will impact different organizations in different ways, but it's written so as to be interpreted to be applied proportionately and in context of your particular program, the particular risks and threats that your programs may encounter, and therefore it's user friendly. It can be taken step by step, and you can test your travel risk management program against the standard to identify where the gaps are. I think the important thing is when it is published, to compare your program with it and identify the gaps. And I think the benefit of that is that you become very conscious about how you compare to a globally developed good practice standard. You can understand where your gaps are, and you can give thought about whether you want to close those gaps or whether they're gaps you're prepared to tolerate, but you can justify that decision. And that's the key thing. It's about showing the due diligence associated with your travel risk management activities. The standard also requires that you integrate your travel risk management activities with your organisation's wider travel risk management activities. Your wider risk management activities. And so what that means is really working with HR, working with occupational health, working with your security professionals, your risk management professionals, procurement, insurance, legal, because they've all got a contribution and the standard recognises that. And most importantly, your third-party providers, whether it's a medical services company like Collinson, whether it's a TMC or a security advisory company like Crisis 24, they've all got a contribution to make. And this standard provides a framework, a very detailed, methodical framework to work through to make sure you're getting the very best contributions and that you're aligned with the good practices that this standard brings forward.
Thanks for that, Bob. I'm sure that there's a number of corporates around the world that over the last 12 months have been trying to come up with their own standards. And we've already heard Nicola talking about the good work that they've done there at EY. So it's great to see that this is coming down the pipe, and I don't think the summer can come too soon relative to that. It's probably great timing if everything goes well relative to vaccinations and travel opening up around the world. Corporates do have a little bit of time to get things in place and start to put the standards in place. Thanks for that. Now, Richard, moving on to you. Obviously, the concept of travel risk and security risk has always existed for employees, and due to a number of different threats, etc., that they might come across as people travel around the world into more challenging regions. Speaking to you a few days ago, you mentioned that even though lower traveler volumes are out there right now, the number of cases you are still seeing remain higher than I would have expected, that's for sure. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing from a security and risk perspective, and how COVID has maybe impacted security in the recent months?
Yeah, certainly, and welcome everybody. I mean, my function and my team's function is we respond with the direct on behalf of a client or through the insurance piece, and that is to respond on known perils that may be activated, which is extortion, missing persons, wrongful detention, kidnap for ransom. And even though a lot of companies have got travel bans or they cannot travel out their own geographical locations because of national bans, we have not seen a drop in the tempo of cases, and a lot of that is due to the fact that in a lot of emerging markets, people's livelihoods have been taken away, so you see a spike in criminality, and they often will see expats, for example, as being cash cows. They're working for a famous brand. They'll be seen as being wealthy, and so we've not seen a drop in tempo. Other industries will always travel regardless of COVID, and of course the merchant marine being one, and we're seeing piracy cases, particularly off the West Africa, have actually gone up over that period. And of course, this has all been compounded by the fact that we've got situations like we're seeing in Myanmar now, where we've got social, political unrest. People are looking to leave the country. The commercial airlines aren't flying at the moment, so we're looking at ways to get around that. But then you've got the added layer of COVID. So, regardless of whether your staff wish to leave and you can arrange for charter aircraft, you've still got to get your people tested. You've still got to make sure that, not just from the point, the port of embarkation, you've got to meet the required standards, but the destination you're choosing to fly to. And, this is why it's very important that those people responsible for travel, HR, keep abreast of the latest requirements with any country with regards to testing on arrival, quarantine, everything else, because there's nothing worse than, in an emerging market where people want to get out of the country, that you get them from their safe haven to an airport only to find that they can't travel simply because the destination they're going to, you've not met their requirements. So then they have to turn around and go all the way back to where they came from. And of course, that is not ideal. causes an additional layer of stress and everything else. So, yeah, I mean, for us, we've not seen our business drop off. I mean, of course, you know, in our industry, we do thrive on you know, unfortunate circumstances where clients find themselves in difficult situations. Now, our ability to travel has been impacted, so we've had to get creative. You know, as we're speaking today on Teams, that's obviously been, you know, Teams, Zoom, and other medium. Even, you know, when you're dealing with kidnappers, they've adapted to technology very quickly to use, you know, the means of communicating, whether it be, you know, social media or whatever. So yes, I mean, you know, it is interesting times for all, but, you know, you have to adapt and move on. And we're certainly seeing clients that are, you know, facing the same problems they've always faced. Just because they're not traveling, they still have, you know, business continuity. They still got to keep these operations moving in these difficult markets. They've just got that additional layer of having to deal with the requirements surrounding COVID.
That's a really interesting perspective. I think a lot of people forget that there's still a lot of expats in developing markets, high risk locations, et cetera, that are exposed, as you say, because of the economic environment. And yes, I know there's a few of us on this call that are supporting some of the initiatives coming out of Myanmar, et cetera. And we'll be talking to Yining in a moment about that.
Sorry, just one final point I will add, sorry to interrupt. We always see two types of travelers that get into trouble. You see, and this is a point that just touching on what you've just said, you've got the naive traveler that's never been to that market before. So they arrive at night, they don't get the right transportation, they go to, you know, and they end up in a difficult situation. Or you have the old China hand expat who's lived there for 30 years, thinks they're more local than the locals, and goes out drinking in the wrong areas or socializing in the wrong areas of town, and they get into trouble. All right, so you know you have two types of individual that ends up, you know, getting in these messes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just remind everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please do put them into the chat so that we can ask them to the panelists. Simon, I want to carry on from a comment that Richard just made, which was, you know, when you're in situations, you know, for example, people leaving Myanmar having to get tested actually before they leave, depending on the destination they're heading to. It's not just those kind of situations. Even our testing facility outbound at Heathrow, we see passengers showing up at the airport and not aware that they needed to have a pre-flight negative test. What are the fundamentals that companies really need to be thinking about to better protect their employees? The pre-briefings, during travel, post-travel?
Absolutely. Just to address that particular issue, I'd like to reinforce the fact that you have to keep on checking the governmental sites of where you're going. These things change incredibly quickly. In the UK, we're instigating a new regime of testing, day 2, day 8, and we're still we're still going on with our day 5 testing, and these things change incredibly quickly. But your broader point is that it's important to look at these things, of the issues before you travel, during, and when you come back, in fact, as well. That's important not to forget about. I think increasingly the idea for companies is to produce or get employees who are well suited to a particular posting or particular travel, that they have a good fit with what they're doing. And that's not just that they have the right skills in terms of business, but also that they have a good medical fit, psychological fit, and personal fit, including family situation, of course. It's more simple if you're going on a business trip, perhaps, for a weekend. What happens if you're being posted for 4 months, or like the Foreign Office for 3 years? So in that case, you'll have to consider past medical history, what medical facilities are there locally, what medications they take, psychological history. But there's no need to be daunted, because assistance companies, that's what we do for our bread and butter, and also we help with the confidentiality, of course. So there's a lot to do before. The most important, and currently, of course, is the pandemic. or what is actually happening at the time in that situation. And we've been advising multinationals and governments for many years on Ebola, Zika, MERS, and obviously COVID-19 is the most current one and most important. So during the assignment, the most important thing is that you have 24/7 contact with someone who knows what they're talking about, someone who knows the region, someone knows where the emergency evacuation points are, if it's security or obviously for medicine. Just to share a quick set of stories for COVID-19. This has been very challenging, as you can imagine, evacuating people out of difficult parts of the world. We've been evacuating people with COVID and without COVID from Afghanistan and Iraq since the beginning, and we're still doing it. There have been more air ambulance evacuations because getting medical escorts into the country and then not quarantining when they come back has been very difficult. Airspaces have been summarily closed, and if you are routing an air ambulance, that often results in longer times for the air ambulance to get to the destination, means that they have to refuel more. But where do they refuel? Because the airspaces are closed. And also, it's also impacted where the patient actually gets treated. So the countries that you would normally go to are not accepting foreign nationals, especially for COVID. And I must say here that over the last year, Germany and Turkey have been absolutely fantastic and life-saving for many of our clients. They have accepted for Germany, they've accepted non-EU nationals without question, without quibble, and they've treated them in their first-rate medical facilities. So lots of people have stepped up as well. So when people come back from the assignment, clearly they may need to quarantine. In the UK at the moment, if you come back to the UK from 33 particular countries which are red listed, you have to go to a hotel compulsorily observed there for 10 days. Even if you're not quarantining in that sort of facility, you may have to work at home and quarantine. If it's a long placement, we all know about reverse culture shock, coming back into the culture you thought was going to be friendly and then realizing it's completely different to what you've adjusted to over the last 3 or 4 years. And of course, the medical needs and the presentation of infectious diseases that might not be prevalent in your home country. So a whistle-stop tour of something that's a very big subject, but these are the sorts of things that companies need to think about.
Thanks for that, Simon. Now, Yining, Simon's touched upon something that you've spent a lot of your career focused on, which is the human aspect of travel and how stressful it can be, especially with COVID right now. How important is it that companies ensure that they're taking a holistic view regarding employee well-being so that trips are as low stress as possible?
Thanks, Todd. I think that the stress is not just from the corporate level. Actually, I think the key message or another key point I would like to highlight in this is the human aspect. And so we talked about the various like corporate and travel policy. We understand some different corporates have kind of like evolving in different sets of policy. Some of my Asian clients I've been dealing with last 10 years. They have a stricter policy than others. So when their employees travel, I remember a client of mine who is quite a good friend of mine. when he traveled from Africa to Asia, he has to actually not just be in quarantine after he arrived, he actually have to be quarantined before he start traveling. And then during his travel over several days, bearing in mind, everyone knows that now less flights and frequency, and you have more check and more regulation in different transit cities. You have to wear the full-on PPE, like a surgeon in a surgery, and throughout the whole journey. It's not comfortable. Not to mention that when they arrive in the destination, they have not just to follow the rules in the destination countries, but also the corporate requirements, because that is what they have to do as an employee. So I think we cannot stress enough the importance of the communications, and that's what I actually gathered in the last several months. It's not just about the cliche or corporate message from the top to the employees, but also vice versa. It's the feedback, it's the feeling, a suggestion from the employees out to the HR and management. And I'm sure that Nicola, touching on that point, that STIC actually have to really work together with security and also working for HR operation to make sure that we come up with a holistic view on this. And another thing that I can see from my client is about different cultures, different values, because we all come from different background. We are in the same company policy, under the same umbrella, and how are we going to react differently because we come from different value and perspective. So I just actually gathered from a colleague that during a recent survey, 50% of the respondents actually did not know if something happened, what they have to do, what's the communication protocol. And these are the things that we just realized actually between the people and people, individual within the companies, there are a lot of uncertainty. And not to forget that if they have to travel, and I'm sure I'm the one, if before I travel, I actually get nervous. So it's before and during the travel, and we're not sure what's going to happen during the travel, although we were well prepared with all the information that we need. But what if I'm caught in an unexpected situation, whether it's because the flight cancellation, you have to be stuck in the airport that actually you're not allowed to stay there for more than 48 hours. Otherwise, you are subject to another set of tests, or because somebody in the flight actually all tested positive. So the whole aircraft of passengers actually put in limbo. So this is stressful. And we all actually know that such problem also lead to problem personally or from the family. So these are all the things that I think we have to put into consideration when we are designing the travel risk management policy.
You hit on some really interesting human factors, and something that I'm hearing a lot more from friends and professionals in the community now. People that are now asking the question, I never thought of it before. When I travel, does my company have medical assistance backup for me? Is there a Collinson assistance out there behind if I get sick while I'm traveling? What happens if I'm in a security situation? Is there a crisis 24 behind my company to support me? And employees don't historically know the answer to these questions. It's going to be actually very critical going forward. Nicola, if I could come back to you for a second, and as you listen to all the different panelists, I mean, obviously with EY, you've been very progressive in putting things in place, but what's your impression in terms of the general corporate environment out there? Are they even aware of things like the new ISO travel risk management standards coming out, and the real implications that they're going to have to put in place as corporate travel begins again?
I think in terms of the actual standard itself, I'll be honest with you, until we had our pre-discussion last week, I wasn't aware of it. And so, as a standard, which is a good thing, it's a good thing for all organizations to have something to globally benchmark themselves against to see how they stack up. I think one thing I would say is that, if you look at, and I can only speak for large multinationals, and I've worked in a number of multinational programs from large organizations. And I think it was to the point that Bob made earlier on, that these organizations do this piece very well. It's always been inherent in our business to make sure that we've got a good view of where our travellers are and how they can be supported in the event that something goes on. Now, having said that, you know, I think what the situation has done with the pandemic has kind of elevated for any individual now that's going to travel to make sure they understand where that support comes from in the event that they need it. You know, pre the situation we're in now, we communicate, we dish out all sorts of information to travellers to help them understand where that information is. But I can guarantee you, in the crisis situation when it unfolds, none of them will know what to do, because there is an element of stress and of panic. So therefore, it really brings into, you know, the sort of like the light of why there are corporate travel teams and corporate travel security teams as well in any organisation. And so I think, you know, in terms of the corporate industry sector, definitely, you know, having a good view over the safety of travellers and what the safety of travellers is going to need to be in the future. I think all organisations now have got that top of mind. In terms of things like, you know, are people aware, or are organisations aware of global standards? No, I think that's something that there needs to be, you know, more information shared. And I think this is now starting to get picked up by some of the industry bodies, in truth. So I suspect what will happen is that, you know, the train will start to roll now with this information, and organisations will start to look at what it means for them.
Right. Okay, good. Thanks. Now, again, if there's any questions, please do put them into the chat. I'm actually going to throw it open to the panelists to see if the panelists have any questions for each other at this time. If we've any of the conversation has stimulated a question or two.
Actually, I have a question, probably obvious coming from the person that's in a corporate travel program, and actually it's for Bob, because Bob, you mentioned earlier that you know, in terms of the work that's gone on to develop the standard, and you know that's an international standard that's been ratified, I guess, by 160 countries, I think you mentioned, with various stakeholders. Who are those stakeholders that have been involved in this process? I'd just be keen to understand, is that governments, is that other corporate organisations? Because I think, you know, as we're all benchmarking ourselves, that's interesting and important for us to understand as to how that standard has been developed.
Yeah, it's been developed. So, for example, in the UK, it's been led by the British Standards Institute, supported by the Security Institute, and then a community of expertise has been built in the UK, and it's been very similar in the US, in Australia, and many other countries around the world. And BSI have led consultation with government, and it's led consultation with the corporate world, as well as associations like ITM, GBTA, and many others. So it's been a very broad sort of church that this has been built upon. Now, for example, I was co-opted because of my background as head of counter-terrorism in the UK, and my experience in dealing with serious crime, two issues which really affect travel and travel risk. So I think the standards are going to bring a lot of change in thinking. For example, think of accommodation and the selection of accommodation. Historically, a lot of that has been self-certified by hotels saying, yes, we've got really good security, and ticking boxes in RFPs. The standard really turns that on the head and says, well, look, you really should be looking for objective, independent assurance that the standards in that hotel or the other accommodation are fit for purpose. So it really sort of shifts the emphasis to having either accredited accommodation where you know it's already been independently assessed, or making some other arrangements, drawing in some other expertise if you haven't got the internal capability to assess it. So it will change the way people behave. Now, some companies already do this, but many don't, and they take the hotel's word for it. Many hotels have really good security, but unfortunately not all of them do, and things need to change.
I see that we have a question from the audience, from Simon Hegg, who is an old hat in the world of travel management and travel risk. His question is: many companies have emergency medical support for senior management, but few for all employees. With the needs going forward, do you see this expanding to all employees? And then the second part of his question is also with these and other frictional costs to productivity, stress, etc. How do you see these impacting the volume of travel going forward? Who wants to pick up the first part of that question, which is about extending to all employees?
Shall I kick off? I think it's absolutely essential that if a company is sending employees on their behalf across the world to do business for them, that they're adequately protected. This is absolutely the standard of care. It is definitely not enough that they rest on their own insurance if they have some. Just a quick consideration of if you're sending someone, say, to Tanzania and then they are in a road traffic accident, they have a heart problem, they have an appendicitis, what are you going to do? It's really not true that all hospitals are the same and all doctors are the same, and you just need to get advice. It's more than advice. Obviously, we evacuate people and we treat people directly, but what to do in these emergency situations? You need to know that they need an emergency air evacuation to Kenya next door, and you need to know where the good hospitals are in Kenya and the Aga Khan or Nairobi Hospital. So if you don't have that information at your fingertips, then things are going to go wrong. So yes, of course, I would say please extend it to all of your employees. It's really important.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah,
and
I would agree with that. It has to be all employees that have the same care, because all organisations have a duty of care. So I think you shouldn't, regardless of rank of employee, everybody needs to have the same access to support.
And Nicola, maybe carrying on with yourself in the second part of this question, which is around the frictional costs to productivity, stress, etc. Do you see this impacting the volume of travel going forward?
Yeah, honestly, I do. I think, as I mentioned earlier on, we won't have the same volumes of travel that we had pre the pandemic. We absolutely won't. And we're encouraging our business not to, to manage that. And, I think as a good example of that, we as an organisation, we've got very big domestic volumes in a lot of markets, and a lot of people will shuttle backwards and forwards for one-day trips or for the same day. I think we all have to question, is there a need to do that now, given the fact that here we are, we're all on a web call with different people from around the world conducting a meeting. And so therefore you have to question what's necessary. And that plays into whether it's a case of, the stress and the friction on employees versus, the right thing to do from a kind of sustainability agenda within an organization. So I think fundamentally it will change volumes of travel for many organizations.
Thanks, Nicola. I see that there's another question from Bronwyn Freeman here, and I think probably a question to Bob and then maybe to Richard as well, which is around hotels and accommodation. And I know that GSA has been working on this specific area, and Simon's been involved in those conversations with Bob as well. I haven't been able to get anything from travel providers about how they evaluate their hotels and accommodation. And Bob, you already started to touch upon it. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that accreditation that probably more than ever is needed for hotels.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And this is where I think ISO 31030 will drive changes in behaviour, because this is a very opaque question in a sense. How are providers assessing accommodation? And the research we've undertaken, has revealed a complete lack of consistency, a lack of standards, and lack of transparency about how that is done. A lot of it has simply relied on RFPs asking hotels about their security posture and their security attributes. And of course, hotels are anxious to win business. So they don't, it's difficult to give an objective and impartial view on your own security performance. So I think organisations should be asking these questions and should be thinking about other routes to establishing the security qualities, if you like, of the accommodation choices that they're looking at. GSA provides an accreditation service which hotels can use to demonstrate to their customers and clients that their security is fit for purpose. Some big organisations can afford to send their own teams, but essentially the standard looks for objectivity and an evidence-based approach.
And that's really extending duty of care, not just to the employee. I mean, when you're talking about hospitality space, it's duty of care to the end consumer as well. That might be airlines, it might be hotels, it might be retail.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And Richard, your views on really the same question. I'm probably one of those kind of hands where I walk into a hotel, and I've been in Asia for 25 years, and I'm probably too nonchalant. I've got a really good friend who the first thing she does is looks at what are the escape routes, etc., in case something goes wrong.
I mean, you think hotels, their security levels would be relative to their star rating, but actually that's not the case. And also, you know, different hotels, whether a resort hotel is very difficult to secure when benchmarked against a hotel in an inner city. A lot of hotels have famous restaurants and commercial outlets, so they're trying to attract an external footfall, which makes it very, very difficult to secure. You know, do they do background checks on their key staff? I mean, there's lots of things about a hotel which is incredibly complicated to secure. Location alone, I mean, you could look at a hotel that has very good security, but it's actually next to an embassy, which is a target on a known group's list. So there's really is lots of different factors. And I think that's why, you know, having a standard which you can benchmark against will hopefully mean that hotels will up their game, and there will be a degree of consistency, because at the moment, obviously hotels love to spend money on, you know, fixtures, fittings, interior, you know, attracting the best Michelin starred restaurants or, you know, retail outlets, but, you know, often security is bottom of the list simply because that's a cost which often guests find they don't like if there's too many CCTV cameras or it's too difficult to get from the lobby to their respective floors. You know, I mean, it's a double-edged weapon. If it inconveniences a user, then they also don't like it. So it's a very fine line on hotels. It's supposed to be an inviting environment, but the security has to be commensurate with the environment that the hotel is operating in. So yeah, very interesting. And I know it's a challenge to risk, you know, security directors is, you know, which hotels we put on our list, which hotels do we take off our list? You know, and that's why I think a standard would be extremely useful to help people benchmark you know, different hotel chains.
All right, thanks, Richard. And one last question, and then I'll ask for a quick answer from Simon, because we're coming up on the hour, and we'll let him wrap up. The question really is around the medical community and industry and what it's doing to help push COVID-19 vaccine availability globally. On the news, we see that there are some challenges rolling the vaccines out.
Absolutely. Most of this is done at governmental level, obviously. But our industry, the important role is to do with lobbying. And when, I think practically speaking, when a country has ensured that their riskiest people are protected, then they'll be in a much stronger position to share out any excess vaccine. I'm very confident that's going to happen in the UK with all the other things that extra vials that they have, but we have an important point in lobbying governments around the world.
Great, thanks, Simon. Well, first of all, let me thank the panelists today. I think it was a fantastic discussion. I appreciate everyone's insight and everybody's input. You know, it is as Simon started off saying, you know, it's amazing the unprecedented speed in terms of where the vaccines have gone. It's great to see, you know, Nicola, your organization, and others that are progressing ahead of standards coming out. Bob, that the standards are coming, and there's reference points for people to use. Richard, the reminder that security is still a really important factor for people that are traveling. And Yi-Ning, the human factor. Thank you so much for adding that piece, because it's something I think sometimes companies forget. There is still a human factor that's out there. So I thank you all again. For those of you that have joined, thank you for joining us. Know that you're not alone. There's a lot of experts on this call and out there in the industry that can help you at your initiatives, etc. So please feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for support or even just a little bit of advice on the side. We're all here to hopefully help get the world traveling safely again. So thank you very much for everyone's participation, and have a great rest of your day.